Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Breakdown. Today we're going to be looking at the Sunday School lesson for October the 19th, 2025. This is covering 1 John 4:19 through 5:5. And the topic of this Sunday School lesson is relating in love to God and others. As we get into the Sunday School lesson, one of the first questions that it asks is, what is something in your life, either as a kid or in recent years, that you worked really hard to save money for? So Cody, what was something that you worked really hard, either as a kid or recently?
I'm going to embarrass myself here, but one thing that I firmly remember me saving money for were Pokemon cards when I was little. And that was probably the first time that I've ever gotten beaten as a child, because I did not have enough money to buy them. And that was when Dad was still active duty military, so we were at the PX. And I figured out in my head that if I just opened the pack in the store, it looked like I already bought them. The problem with that is as a 7-year-old little kid thinking I got these cards, didn't realize they had security cameras. And I didn't also realize that when I did something stupid like that, my dad's upper command would be called. So not only did I get it in the store, I got it when I got home too, which taught me never to steal again, which was a good lesson. But yeah, that's the one thing that popped in my mind when I saw this was stinking Pokemon cards. I don't think I ever bought another pack after that. Like, I was so scared that if I bought another pack, I'd just get beat again or something. I don't know.
Pokemon cards are evil.
Yeah.
That's funny. So mine, I guess I got a couple. One was a Lego set when I was growing up. And I remember I was looking at all the, back in the days when you got a Lego set, you got a small brochure of all the other Legos that you could buy. And so I would get those and then look at that Lego set wish list for like 2 years, because we were in South America and then we'd have to wait till we came back to the States. And I remember there was this one big one that was like $100-something, and I saved and finally got it. And so that's one thing I remember saving up for. And then the other was, well, hunting trips nowadays. If I want to go on a hunting trip, I got to save up some money, because those things are not cheap. So just little by little saving here and there. And so all of that is something that I save up for. And so as we're kind of getting into the lesson and talking about it, we start saving up for things that we deem have value. And, for you you said you were 7. So as a 7-year-old kid, having Pokemon cards, that was really valuable to you. Me as a 9-10-year-old, saving up for a Lego set was valuable. Nowadays, saving up for a hunting trip, I see that as valuable. So we save up for and work hard for the things that we see valuable. And, we got to think about what, as believers, is valuable. And what would it look like if we valued loving God and loving people over everything else? And that's kind of the gist of what we're getting into in the Sunday School lesson, is the importance of love and loving the way that God does. So I want to start out with verses 19 through 21 of chapter 4, 1 John 4:19 through 21. And it says, we love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God and yet hates his brother, he is a liar. For the person who does not love his brother or sister, whom he has seen, cannot love God, whom he has not seen. And we have this command from him: the one who loves God must also love his brother and sister. So, these are some really powerful words that John is telling us here in 1 John. So the first part I find is extremely important. We are able to love because he, meaning Jesus, loved us first. We are not able to love then if we, think this through. We can't love if we have never loved or been loved by Jesus first and experienced that love. So all of this comes from Jesus, what he's done on the cross for us. He came and, for God so loved the world, he loves everybody. He wants all to come to him, but we must experience his love before we can love others.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I would really like to point out in this verse is he mentions brothers and sisters, and he uses that connotation to kind of bring across this familial kind of feel to it. But also, I want you guys to realize brothers and sisters are usually more volatile in arguments towards each other too. He does not say here that loving each other is not going to have differences in arguments and you're going to have disagreements. He doesn't say that at all. What he's saying here is showing love like Christ showed love. Christ took on our sin on the cross and gave that his life over for us in that scenario so that we can live with, and that's the love he's showing us. Mm-hmm. And in that same way, for our brothers and sisters, we can take our disagreements and our arguments and our differences, and we can lay them aside and know that it's okay to disagree. Okay. If you look at the body of Christ, a finger is not going to do what an eye does. And sometimes what the finger does is going to offend the eye. And that's okay. But if we all do our own job and love each other, as he says here, as brothers and sisters, get past our differences and love your brother and sister anyway, that's kind of how Christ intended it. And it's not even kind of, it's exactly how he intended it. So just take it as it is, like he wrote it. Brothers and sisters, if all of you have siblings, those of you that do have siblings, know that you've had arguments with your siblings before, but yet there would be a time where you would do anything you could to save them or help them or aid them in any way because you love them dearly. Mm-hmm. And that's the same way it should be for our fellow Christians.
Yeah. And it's really powerful too, and you hit on this. We cannot claim to love God if we don't love our brothers and sisters in Christ. There is no way to justify that. We can't say we love, oh man, I love God, I love Jesus, but every time a fellow church member or a fellow believer walks in the room, like we hate them. We have this sour face. We can't stand being around them.
One thing I can't stand is when you're in church with somebody and you're standing there with them and they're like, man, I just love everybody. You just got to love everybody. And then you go to lunch and that poor little homeless man outside and that person that just told you, man, you got to love everybody. It's like, well, get off your butt, bum, and go get a job. And I'm like, whoa, yep. What happened to that loving everybody? We have this weird ability, and I'm not going to just say here, all of Western Christianity, all of the church, really, as a whole, we have this weird ability to only love the people we want to love because they fit our agenda. Whether it is because they have a pretty good pocketbook and they give well and they tithe well and we're like, man, we love them. Or if it's somebody that gives you gifts, you're like, man, I love them. But when it comes down to you giving something to somebody that you don't know, it's this harder ability to love. And what I want you guys to realize is loving the easy people is not what Jesus did. Loving the religious people is not what Jesus did. He loved the ones that were difficult to love. Mm-hmm. And that's what really got him in the point of the Pharisees wanting to kill him, is because he was loving the people that were hard to love. And that's the picture he wants us to see, is we need to love the people that are hard to love just as much as we love the people that are easy to love.
Yeah. And I think going on what you just said is really important to define what love we're talking about, because we're not talking about an eros love, which is a sexual kind of love. We're not talking about a phileo love necessarily, which
right.
is a brotherly love, which it is brotherly love.
But that's not what he's meaning.
But
here.
He's talking about a self-sacrificing love that, he loved us with that. And because he loves us with that, then we also should be loving others with that self-sacrificing love. So the prime example of exactly what he's talking about here, love-wise, is, 1 Corinthians 13. And we see that true love is patient, it's kind, it doesn't envy, it's not boastful, it's not arrogant, not rude, not self-seeking, not irritable. It doesn't keep a record of wrongs. It finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. And that's what love is. We have to love, like the kind of love that he's talking about here in 1 Peter is that kind of love.
Yeah.
1 John is that kind of love. We must love with that type of love. Not only God, we have to love God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength with this idea, but we got to love our brothers and sisters in Christ in the same way. And, the language here is strong. If we hate our brothers and sisters and claim to love God, we are liars. And that's sin. It's a sin. So if you are claiming to love God but hate your brother and sister, you are sinning. That's just the way it works, and that we see that here from 1 John. And I love this too. For a person who does not love his brother or sister whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. You know, that brings back some pictures of doubting Thomas and all that. You know, he believed because he saw. So a demonstration of, you know, our faith in God is how we love people. If we don't love people the way that he's telling us to, then it brings into serious doubt whether we actually love God or not.
Yeah, I mean, it really boils down to the question of, are you obedient or not? And if you are obedient, you will be doing the things he's asking you to. And if you're not, it just boils straight down to, if you're not obedient, you're sinning, and you're living in a lifestyle of sin. If you're not obedient to who God has called you to be and who He has wanted you to be through Him. Mm-hmm. And if you don't follow that example and you're not obedient to that, you are living in sin openly. It doesn't take these drastic, horrible things to happen for you to be in sin. Actually, the way sin works is a gradual decline into where you don't even realize you've slipped away so far.
Yep.
And it literally starts with being disobedient to God. That's where it starts. Once you stray from the word and what he wants you to do, that's sin. And that's when it starts to getting degrees away from him. And love is number one. That's where it starts. He said it's the greatest commandment to love one another as ourselves and love God. And if you're not loving God, you cannot love others. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. So when he says love your brother and sister here, he's also meaning you first have to love God, because without that you can't love your brothers and sisters. And I almost think this is almost John saying, hey, if you're struggling loving people around you, you may need a checkup. It may be a situation where you don't love God. I'm just saying, if you're truly loving God, that love and compassion for your brother and sister will naturally be there. So it's a checkup if you're not loving your neighbors and your brothers and sisters.
And I think of there's been some really awesome older people in my life at different churches I've been a part of, some in my family, that you see them and because you know the backstory and you know the familial issues and things like that. You know that there have been issues either in the family, and we can talk about the family side of things, or in the case of like some church things. And again, this is just for me being at other churches and those places, kind of the backstory of some issues. But in the midst of all of that, they still love those people that have hurt them, harmed them, and they just have a joy that, you can only express comes from God.
Yeah. And
that joy is just a reflection of their love for God, and it's being demonstrated through the love for others, and they have joy because of it. And it's just amazing how that works. And, verse 21, you were talking about this just now, but, we can't love God and not love our brother or sister. We're commanded to. And, we just read this in John chapter 13, when Jesus is, he's just completed the Lord's Supper. Judas leaves, and Judas Iscariot leaves, and he's sitting around the table, just sitting around the table, and he says, hey, I give you a new command. This is John 13:34. I give you a new command. Love one another just as I have loved you. You are also to love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So John is just regurgitating what Jesus commanded all of his true disciples to do. And I say that because Judas Iscariot had just left, so it's just the 11. Commanded them to do, and that is to love one another, and that they would be known by their love. And so John is just reiterating this. Not only is it demonstrating we actually love God because of the way we love one another, but that's how we're now identified, is that we love one another.
Isn't it amazing how when you show God's love, it becomes your identity? Mm-hmm. I don't know how better to say it than, if you are truly a believer, the actions of obedience through loving God and loving others will make you a follower, not only by your actions, but it identifies you because he has set you apart, and he is the only reason you have that love to begin with.
Yep.
So it's not coincidental. I think it's completely amazing in how God works, that once you turn over yourself to him and start loving people as he loves people, it becomes your identity, not just a part of you. It becomes your entire identity and every motive that you have.
Yep. But everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And that's the identity we have to have, is we're disciples of Christ. And it just like what you said, it comes from our love for one another. All right, we're going to go into chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. It says the following: everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the Father also loves the one born of him. This is how we know that we love God's children, when we love God and obey his commands. For this is what love for God is, to keep his commands. And his commands are not a burden, because everyone who has been born of God conquers the world. This is the victory that has conquered the world, our faith. Who is the one that conquers the world but the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? So we've just talked about the importance of loving one another because God has loved us first. And then he talks about loving God. So notice that everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the Father also loves the one born of him. So this really gets into some very deep theology and a beautiful theological discussion that we see in the New Testament, that if you love Jesus, you actually love God. But notice, if you claim to love God, but you don't love Jesus, then you don't really love God, which means you're not really following God. So this is another example of the New Testament talking about the fact that our salvation is dependent on what we do with Jesus. If we do not love Jesus with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, we do not love God the Father with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And so the Old Testament laws really revolve around loving Jesus with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength.
Yeah.
So it's what we do with Jesus. If you don't believe in Jesus, then you don't believe in God.
Right. And John does this beautiful job of explaining that over and over and over again. Beginning in the first chapter of John, he tells you the Word was God, the Word was with God, the Word is Jesus. Jesus was there at the beginning. He was God. He was with God. And then he goes forward showing the love of Christ through his book. And then he says this exact point here of, you can love God and reject Jesus and you're not saved.
Yep.
You can love Jesus and reject God and you're not saved. They're both in the same. You have to love both of them. And again, it's exactly what you said. It's the perfect picture in the New Testament of saying everything hangs on Jesus.
Everything.
And isn't it cool how Jesus hung for everything, and in return, everything hangs on him?
Yep.
And I don't know any other way you can get around it of saying to somebody, look, Jesus is the only way, other than saying Jesus is the only way, because he was there in the beginning when they created the earth. He was with Moses when Moses went to the mountaintop. I mean, he's watched everything from the Old Testament through, and everything, even before the Holy Spirit came into the earth, he is responsible for every single person that was a martyr for Christ. It's that simple. Jesus is the reason for everything up to this point.
Yep. Yeah, and it's the reality is everybody tries to get to heaven their own way. Everybody claims they have access to God. Every religion in the world claims to have access to God, but what they miss is Jesus. And you can even say, even the atheist, in their own way, they claim that they themselves are God.
Yeah.
But everyone who does not claim Jesus, whether you're an atheist, a monk, or a Buddhist, you throw in the religion. If you don't believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God, then you've missed the point. And
you're going to miss the bus.
And you're going to miss the bus. You will. Verse 2, this is how we know that we love God's children, when we love God and obey his commands. So when we demonstrate that we are loving God, when we are living that out in our life as believers, the way we know that we love God's children is because we love God and obey his commands. And then he continues on in verse 3, for this is what love for God is, to keep his commands. So, we can talk all day long about loving God. We can talk all day long about loving others. But the reality is, we as God's people, the way we demonstrate love for God is because we love to obey what he's told us to do. And, it goes back to, a real easy example is children. They obey their parents because they love their parents. Yes, they might be fearful of them, but we should also be fearful of God because he can destroy
as they
body and spirit.
Kids, be fearful of your parents.
Yes, but at the same time, we also want to grow to the point where we obey God's commands because we love him. And that is a key testament for us as believers, and a key, I think, a check for us is to look at our lives and assess our lives in such a way and say, do I follow God's commands, and do I love to follow God's commands? And you can look at this from just the basics. Do I love telling the truth? Do I love obeying what God's word says about marriage? Do I love obeying what God's word says about adultery and other types of sin and not stealing and not being covetous of things? All the things that God has told us to do. Do I love those things or do I despise them? Do I think what God's word tells me is wrong and a burden, or do I feel that it is a help and something that God has put there for me? And that's why he continues on here and says, and his commands are not a burden. So we as believers should realize that we demonstrate our love for God because we keep his commands, not only because we love God, but we realize that his commands are actually not a burden. His commands are actually the best for us.
Right. And usually, and this is just from experience, and this is not something I've taken out of the Bible at all. This is just me experiencing it in life. Usually, God's way is only hard when, one, you're fighting it.
Yep.
Two, you're living in sin and it's the only right thing you're doing. Or three, you're not doing it his way. Those are the only three things that I've experienced in my life that make what God asks us to do is hard. Once you give everything in and you do what he's asking you to, it really does become easy because it's a set standard. Like in this world today, in the world we live in, the standards change constantly. One standard you may have met yesterday is now different today, and you've got to achieve more or achieve less in some cases. But God's standard is completely the same all the time. And his rules to get that standard don't change either. It's to love God, love people, obey his word, and follow Jesus. It doesn't change from that. So when you start following him and giving him everything, it is really kind of easy to follow. It's not something that you have to change constantly. And if it's difficult, it's usually because you're not where you're supposed to be. And it's just, I don't know how much easier to say that. It's when he says, I'll make your yoke light. He's not saying he's going to make it easy either. Mm-hmm. What he's saying is you're not going to be alone.
Yep.
You don't have to bear this by yourself is really what he's saying, because the picture of a yoke is tying two oxen together to work as one to lighten the load for each other. And when you look at that verse, he's not saying, look, if you follow me, it's going to be real easy. What he's saying is, if you follow me, I will make it to where I'm with you always. And when you have somebody that has already conquered the world with you, it is kind of easy.
And I think of it too, you've got obviously the oxen, the farming thing of a plow and, two oxen tied together. But just from a personal note of, two guys striving and working hard to get an elk off a mountain.
Oh, I haven't been there, but
like when I went with my buddy Kyle and we shot an elk back in 2023, we have this 500 to 600 pound animal and we're carrying this thing off together. And just the simple fact of having another guy there with me to help share the load made it bearable. Yeah. If it would have just been me, I don't know that I could have done it. But having that person there with me even though they're carrying the weight too, just gave me energy and the ability to get the animal off the mountain. How much more so with God, who does the work? God has the ability to take all the weight, and he goes along with us, and he's not just sharing half the burden, he's sharing, I would say, all of it, but he's wanting us to go along with him and work. And it feels to us like we've got the weight.
Yeah. But
in reality, God's got the weight. Well, and we gotta look to him and let him do it. And that's, and that's the thing here. He has commands for us to do, right? Mm-hmm. And if we don't do them, it's sin that we should be punished for.
Yeah.
But guess who already paid the price for it? Jesus did. Like exactly. he already took the weight. And so just following his commands as believers then should be, yes, I know it's difficult because we're sinful human beings and we will be sinful until the day we die. But we have to realize Jesus has already carried the burden. He has paid for the burden. We just need to follow in his footsteps, but he goes with us. And that's just a wonderful thought that we can rely on him to lift that burden and make that burden light.
Yeah, and exactly like what you said, he does lighten the burden, and here's why. He's taking a brunt of it. He says, look, the world's going to come against you, but don't fear, I've overcome the world. Mm-hmm. So when he ties you up to his yoke, he's already beaten what you're facing.
He's there. He's the victor.
Like, he already knows how to defeat it. It's like back in the days of Napoleon being in his army and going out and saying, hey, this one's going to go just like yesterday. And all the soldiers know that they're going to be victorious because they've been there. They've watched him defeat every army that he's come up against. Jesus is far more victorious.
Yeah, I was going to
than
say
Napoleon.
But Jesus doesn't have a Waterloo.
Yeah, no. But he's conquered everything that you're going to come up against. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the one thing that especially students have a hard time understanding, is the fact that Jesus has been tempted the exact same ways we've been tempted. No, he didn't have a cell phone. No, he didn't have internet. No, he didn't have those struggles. The temptation was still there.
Still the same.
The temptation of the flesh is what you deal with there. And he was tempted in every way we've been tempted. Mm-hmm. And therefore, he has conquered every temptation. We have not. So we're automatically a student to the game. And then for him to defeat death the way he did and rise again so that we could live with him forever makes it perfect. That's what makes it perfect. And we will never achieve that as humans. We will never achieve perfection until we are home with him.
Yep.
Therefore, when you're on his yoke, you are never the lead oxen.
Yeah.
He is the lead oxen, but he will not take charge. He only works with you.
I love verse 4 because it goes right into what you were talking about. It says, because everyone who's been born of God conquers the world. This is the victory that has conquered the world, our faith. Who is the one who conquers the world but the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? It's exactly what you're talking about. We claim victory as believers because we are tied, our yoke is tied, our burden is tied to Jesus, who has already conquered the world. Our fate is with him because he's taken us. We're his. And he's already won. So we are already victorious over those things. Now, through the process of sanctification, we're achieving that more and more so every day, and we will ultimately achieve it when we're in heaven with him.
Right.
But he's already done it. He's already fulfilled the victory. He's already won. He is the God who loves us so much that not only did he die on the cross for us, but he gave us victory from the very start. And when we put our faith and trust in Jesus, that's what everything hangs on, is what he did on the cross for us. And that's why what we do with Jesus is so important. If we, again, claim God but don't believe in Jesus, we've missed it. And it all comes down to what we do with Jesus.
Period.
Mic
drop.
Let's not drop these mics, though. That's all I got to add. Anything else that you want to add? You thought about?
One thought I had back when you were talking about having kids and how they obey their parents because they love them. One thought I had when you were talking through that is like, man, what if I evaluated my Christian life how I evaluate if I'm being a good father. Like, am I doing something for my child that is worth him acknowledging and following?
Mm-hmm.
Not because I just said so, but because he wants to, because he knows the end result is going to be something good for him. And if I live my life that way, think about it. Jesus lived his life that way. He lived in a way that when he left this earth of the earthly form and went to heaven to prepare us a place, he left a legacy here that has lasted over 3,000 years. Okay? Closer to about 2,500 maybe. But he left a legacy that's still standing today. A legacy that changes people's lives. Not because they have to, but because it's worthy enough to change your life for. If I live my life the same way of, hey, did I do something today that was worthy of somebody changing their life for? Because really, when it comes down to it, we're supposed to live for Christ. Mm-hmm. And we may be the only Christ that they see until he returns. And in that way, have you lived your life to the point that everything you do is worthy of somebody giving up their beliefs and changing their lives forever? And really the answer for myself is not everything. There's a lot of work to do. And if everybody's honest, it's the same answer. But that's a good way to evaluate yourself. And it just clicked when you said that. I was like, man, what if I went through and said, hey, what I did today, was that worth somebody following Christ for? Yeah. And when I discipline my son, is it worth him following my lead and listening to what I say? Not because I told him to, but because he knows what I'm saying is really best for him.
I think you hit on even from a father's perspective, an even more sobering statement. And this is just from a parenting standpoint. Am I leading my children to Jesus in the way that I parent them because I love them and want to see them follow in the legacy I'm leaving, not of maybe being angry or being disconnected or how I love their mom or whatever the case is. But am I loving them in such a way to point my own children to Jesus? Right. So that when they think of my life, they're like, no, I want to, not because they want to necessarily be like me. I'm not saying that I can save them. That's not what I mean. But they think of me once I'm gone and say, he loved Jesus and I want to be like my dad. And I want to love Jesus just as much or more than my dad did. And it's not anything that I did. It's just the way I lived that pointed them to Jesus. And I think that, when you said that, I was thinking of it specifically from a parent standpoint of children. Yeah. And yes, we need to do that. We need to love people that way that aren't our children. But the best disciplers of children are the parents. Mm-hmm. And we have, I think currently the last statistic was somewhere between 65 and 70% of high school students that are in church, when they leave home at 18 and go to college, 65 to 7% of those students never go back to church. So It's vitally important that moms and dads are raising up their children and loving them and calling them to live righteously, not because of a command or because I said so, but because I love you, and training them the right way. Yep. And our first job as Christians is to be disciples, and the disciples starts at home. Mm-hmm. If you cannot disciple your children, your wife, your husband, because wives do disciple their husband in ways, they're not the leadership of the house biblically. But if you can't do that inside your home, there's no way you can do it outside the home. Well, if you don't love your family, you're not going to disciple them. Right. And the thing that really boils down to is love. If you're not loving your family as Christ intended you to love your family, they're not going to want to learn from you. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be well worth your while, and not theirs either. It usually never works. It always ends in something being missing, which is the love, by the way. And then when you look at it from a different perspective of, if you're failing at discipling your own children, what makes you think that you can go outside of your home and act like you can disciple others?
and because in me personally, when I was in youth, and my youth pastor who discipled me, the only reason I followed him is because he was different than what I saw at home.
Mm-hmm.
What I saw at home was very different than what he was preaching to me. But the difference was he wasn't just preaching it to me. He loved his wife dearly. He left the alcohol behind. He loved his kids deeply. And that showed to me that was what drew me into wanting what he was talking about. And if you can't love your family at home, people notice. Mm-hmm. You may think it's a closed door, but it's not. Those things bleed through. People will see the real you eventually. And nobody wants to follow somebody that can't love their family first. And that's just my personal opinion, but it's also in the Bible. Love God, love people, and when you have a family, that comes above everything but God.
Yep. And we have this command from him: the one who loves God must also love his brother and his sister. So the question is, do you love God? Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Breakdown. We look forward to seeing you back here next week.